the size of Swindon as it was then and the size it is now, well, it's enormously different.
Swindon is growing so fast, I can't keep up with it.
Well, it was almost like a big village, really, because everybody knew everybody. I mean, the railways was the biggest employer, and there weren't many other places that were employment in those days. So everybody knew everybody, and it was a very sort of friendly place. I mean, if you walked up the town, you'd be talking to people all the time, you know. So it was a very much, you felt it was a place you belonged to.
I used to live in Graham Street, which is down towards the football ground. And when we were children, we used to play over what we called the fields. And you know the magic roundabout? That before, a long time ago, that was just an island. And behind that was fields all the way to cold water.
And we just do a lot of ordinary things, played a lot of games and that, but I mean, it was so exciting, wasn't it? Just to be part of that local community. Yeah. I lived in Robinchini, so I went to school at Robinchini, and went to Cubs in Robinchini, Scouts, and we also all went to Sunday school in a local chapel.
When I was at school at Sanford Street, every Friday morning, all those children that wanted to go swimming would walk from Sanford Street down to Milton Road and use the small baths, the children's baths. That's how I learned to swim, was through to school on a Friday morning.
And we used to have outings, you know, Sunday school outings. I remember very fond memories of our Sunday school outings. And even during the war, when you couldn't do a lot of things, the adults here, I suppose, used to organise this, and you get a farmer's field or something somewhere, and we always used to walk out to Haydenwick or somewhere or other and take over a field for the day and have games and sports, and it was really, you know, you just get really excited about it, because I mean, during the war years, I mean, things were a bit difficult. You didn't have a lot of extra food and things like that, and sort of things like cakes or biscuits or sweets, didn't have anything. So people used to hoard any stuff they'd get for the Sunday school outing, you know, to go down and have, you know. And we just do a lot of ordinary things, played a lot of games and that, but I mean, it was so exciting, wasn't it? Just to be part of that local community. Yeah.
I started in railway works in January 1960 at the age of 15.
At 1950 I started working in railway works. I left school at 15 at Easter 1950 and then started working in railway works straight after Easter. Large, big, noisy.
First few days was pretty frightening, mainly because of the noise and the environment. The environment was totally new. The first job I had was actually in a shop that is now in a part of the Railway Museum. And it was known as our shop. And the job I was doing was either tapping nuts or facing off bolts.
I was an apprentice, but I didn't start an apprenticeship until we were 16 then. So from Easter until my birthday in January, I worked with a wood machine. And then I had an apprenticeship as a fitter and turner. And I moved it then into a big machine shop, which was very noisy and learned to use working with metal, basically, you know.
The factory was a dangerous place. It was more dangerous in certain shops we worked in.
In that place, I mean, it was working with machinery, and machinery is always dangerous if you're not careful about it. And you really had to know where to put your hands, keep your hands out of the way of things, and don't touch certain things. And you had to learn.
Working on machines, you had to make sure your hands were free. No loose clothing. Make sure your clothing was away from your hands, okay?
Big saws, you know, sort of nearly a metre across, some of the big saws, big circular things, spinning around at enormous speeds and cutting wood, yeah.
Later on in my time in the works, it was working on heavy engineering, which meant a lot of lifting and pit work. So yeah, it was quite dangerous at times.
You have to be very careful. I mean, the first thing you used to tell us, everyone is their own safety officer. You really had to look out what you were doing. But when I was working the first job I had, in that wood machine where there was big saws cutting timber, I mean, huge big things, and it could be dangerous, yeah. In fact, in that shop, there were a lot of people. Most of the men had bits of fingers missing or something like that. It was, yeah. There had been quite a few accidents, yeah.
When I first started there, we were given 2 weeks annual holiday, and that was all.
We started work, I think when I first went in, it was 20 minutes to 8 in the morning, I think was the starting time. And we finished about 5 o'clock.
We had a 10-minute break in the morning, 10 o'clock till 10 past 10, and then one in the afternoon, 3 o'clock till 10 past 3.
Almost as soon as I left school, I started cycling, doing a lot of cycling, joined cycling clubs. And went cycling, did a little bit of racing, and things like that, yeah. So that was most of my spare time was taken out cycling, yeah.
Well, I used to play a lot of sport when I was much younger. And I joined a youth centre, which was Sandford Youth Centre.
Within the railway works, there were a lot of opportunities. There was football teams, cricket teams, people played bowls, there was leagues, we played putting, putting, you know what I mean, putting green, like miniature golf sort of thing. Yeah, we used to play that all over. All the shops had their own teams and all sorts of things like that. We played within the railway works, that was.
And I was also a member of the railway clubs as well, which was Mechanics Institute, and another club which was up in Swindon Road.
Of course, in sports there was always Swindon Town Football Club, and there was a lot of people who used to go and visit, and then Swindon Football Club then used to get regular gates of 18, 20,000, all stood up, parked in, and so a lot of people used to get involved and interested in Swindon Football Club, probably even more so than they are now. When I was that young, we always used it with my family as a library. There was a lending library there. Before there was a library in the town. And so that's where always getting books out of the library. And there was a reading room where you could go and read magazines and things like that. So yeah, we used to use that quite a lot. And there was a theatre in there, of course, used to go to that occasionally, yeah.
Ooh, we used mechanics a lot. Skittles, darts, snooker. There's some very good snooker tables in the mechanics. There's a small shooting range and dancing, and it cost 4p. That's old money, and that was taken out of your wages every week. And that 4p included membership in the mechanics and also the club at Swindon Road.
That's how you got involved in things that workers did for themselves, I mean, that wasn't management or outside organisations, that was the workers themselves who organised all these things. Well, Trip was even long before I went in the railways, you knew about Trip. Although, of course, bearing in mind, I was born in 1935, so I was 4 years old when the war started. So from 4 to 9, that dominated everybody's life, and there was no Trip. I suppose but you couldn't travel anywhere. You couldn't go to the seaside or anything like that. But of course, after the war, I was then about 10 years old, and then we started going to places. But the Trip holiday was a big thing. Everybody looked forward to Trip, and the whole works closed down, and yeah, trains. And I mean, after, say, a couple of years after the war, when it really got going again, the number of trains, and my father would come home on the Thursday or Friday night and said, I've seen the train to Weymouth, I've seen it, and it'll be on so-and-so, and we want this coach, and we go out there, and about 7 o'clock in the morning, and loading up with the trains was not in the station. They were all in the little sidings up there. Walk up steps to get onto the coach, but the excitement of that, you know, as kids, and the big steam engine on the front was unbelievable. Yeah. Yes, my father worked in there, and my two grandfathers both worked in there.
My father worked there. He was a grade A storeman.
And my dad said, well, wouldn't you like to go in the railways? And I'd never even thought of working in the railway works. And I said, well, how would I do that? And he said, well, I'll see what I can arrange. And then he went and spoke to a few people, I suppose. And that was how it was done, I think. You know, he went father to son, father to son.
Like I say, it's grown out of all proportion now.
It's entirely different now. And I mean, I go up to Swindon now and I don't see anybody that I know, you know. And well, I mean, the size of Swindon as it was then and the size it is now, well, it's enormously different. And the shops and whatever have changed. And, yeah.